are you, Ruth?
Lekker, man. Excited for tonight. Woohoo! New things to learn, cool games, things. Yeah.
I prepared tonight. I prepared.
I see.
Thanks to your inspiration, I prepared.
Yes, I look like I did something to a Smurf, but I really didn't. And yeah, we've got a very special guest tonight with us, Mark Oppenheimer. How's it?
How's it, guys? Thanks for having me on.
Hi, Mark. It's lovely to have you with us.
Pleasure.
Cool. So let's start playing.
Sure. So Laura was saying to me earlier that she grew up with the kind of abusive childhood where she only got to play terrible board games like Uno and Cluedo and Monopoly. Monopoly being probably the most abusive game you can play as a kid because you get locked in it for like 8 hours. There's a view that it's not a game, actually. So for something to be a game, you have to be able to make choices. The basic version of not a game is snakes and ladders. So there is no choice to be made. You throw dice, you know, random things happen to you. You go up ladders, you hit snakes, you go down. It's a lot like life, right? You know, random shit happens to you. You know,
Yeah.
you have no control. You know, it's fully determined. But it's a very bad game.
It's like landing on butter, and you just go.
So what's interesting is in the last kind of 20 years or so, there's been this move towards these games made for adults that are more fun, more engaging, and kind of avoid a lot of the traumatic stuff that we had to endure as kids. So I thought I'd kind of tell you a little bit about some of that stuff. Those of you that watch the stream I do with Jason Werbel of Brain in a Vat probably have been looking at this thing going, geez, what the hell's that about? So let me try and show you a little bit. Okay, so this is one of the most successful new games that's come out. It's called Codenames. I'm not sure if your screen shows back to front or not, so if you can read Codenames or if it's in mirror writing. But what's cool about it is it's a great game for like a few people. So you can play with like 8 players. And it's a kind of classic kind of thing to do at a party. And the idea is that you have 2 players who are different from all the others. They are the code masters, and they have a little grid that's secret in front of them. And on the board are 25 words. And the grid shows you which of those words link up with your spies that you have in the field. So the idea is you're trying to bring all of your spies who are sort of lurking in Russia or China, you know, back home. Or if you're a communist, maybe your spies are lurking in South Africa or in America. And they've all got these little code names. And the idea is you're playing this interesting language game with your friends. And so all you're allowed to say as a code master is one word and a number. And that one word will link up in some imaginative way with the words on the field. So, for example, there might be, you know, whale, cow, Singapore, Uranus on the board, and you might think of a word like round, okay? And round might link up with a few of those things. But there's also a kind of assassin lurking around, and if one of the players on your team hits that assassin, game over, you automatically lose. So lots of fun. You can play a game in 15 minutes. It's, I think, my print, which came out 2016, they'd sold about 400,000 copies. So I think it's now like, you know, really hit the lights out. And I think there's a Codenames at night, which is a kind of filthy version. This one you can play with your kids.
So the nighttime one is when you at a bar and you're all drinking and you're having like an adult fun.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's clever about these games, so one of the reasons why Monopoly sucks is that it takes forever. If you're losing, there's often no way to kind of get out of it. So you're trapped in this game. You know, you're like, oh my God, the other guy kind of lucked out and he bought all the cool, you know, things, and he's got the hotels piling up, and eventually my fate circling around. Monopoly, by the way, was designed as a parody of capitalism. It wasn't meant to be a game played and enjoyed. It was meant to sort of, it was called the landlord's game. And the idea was that the landlords always win and the tenants always get fucked. And so this was the design.
Which is what does happen, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. That's my game. That's my industry.
Meant to be a landlord. That's the way to play the game of life.
I must be honest. I must be honest, Mark. I was trying to do a bit of research today, and I was watching another YouTube channel called Board Games Coffee, and he highly recommended this board game called Hate. But also, it's like apparently like a 2-day game. Like after 8 hours, they hadn't even finished the game yet. So, and then there was another one, Quacks of Quedlinburg or something, where it's all doctors and you got to make spells, and I don't know, it sounded a bit freaky.
So yeah, this is the other problem with, people who are enthusiastic about games often are a little overly enthusiastic. So the guy that I kind of like really owe a lot to in terms of introducing me to the hobby just has this incredible collection of games. He's a very bright guy, fantastic to have to kind of explain all the stuff whenever we'd sit around a table. But was a little enthusiastic about other people's capacity. So the game that he would demand that we play is called Twilight Imperium. And it's now in its 4th edition. I think it was made about 25 years ago. It's an epic space game. You sort of play different races and you try and kill each other, and lots of all the little pieces are kind of made after famous sci-fi spaceships. So there's Battlestar Galactica stuff and Star Wars stuff. But your game takes 12 hours, and we have never finished the game. And one of the times that we played, a friend of a friend said, "Oh, I'm a board game designer. I'd love to join you guys for a game sometime." We thought, board game designer. Well, this is the game to play. This is the juggernaut of all games. It turns out that no, we did not finish it. And about 3.5 hours in, she started to kind of get the shakes, and was pretty keen to leave. It turns out the game that she was designing was a reskinned version of Uno. So it was the rules of Uno with like different colors or like animals instead of numbers or something, So this was like really being thrown in the deep end and then having someone, put an army boot over your head and try and drown you. So my feeling is, if you're new to games, like, there's some amazing stuff out there. There's some really beautiful, wonderful games. But, don't jump in the deep end. Start with something fun and light, get a sense of what you're in for. Also, not all games are competitive. So there's these sort of other kinds of playing together where you're trying to solve a puzzle together. The game that kind of started this movement, which is, it's a little, I'm going to say something very, very triggering at the moment, and some of your viewers might want to block their ears. The game is called Pandemic, and it's about a global pandemic. And the idea is that you're collectively, as your mates, trying to like stop this pandemic. It is one of the greatest games ever made, and I have not played it during this time because it's a little too close to home. But if you are up for something like that, it's regarded as the best game of all time, which is Pandemic Legacy. So Pandemic, I'll give you a little idea. You've got a map of the world, looks like Risk. And the idea is you're playing to try and stop the outbreak of a virus, and you're running out of time and running out of resources. So there's some really good similarities with what we're dealing with at the moment, right? The sort of global nature of it, how outbreaks spread in one part of the world, and cities can fall and other places are fine until they're not. But the innovation with the legacy format was to say, well, yeah, you've played the game, and every time you play the game, it's the same. What if we made it different? And what they've done is basically make a calendar year of this game. So you have the month of January, and you open up a whole bunch of cards, and it tells you what the sort of setting is for the world. And when you play the game, it changes the board. So you get a whole bunch of stickers. Like, the game that you play, no one else will ever play. It cannot be replicated. And so the kind of choices that you make are permanent in the game. And so everyone winds up at the end of the calendar year with a totally different board and different decisions and different levels of difficulty. The game also is incredibly clever for something that's made out of cardboard and stickers. It adjusts its difficulty based on how you're playing. So that horrible feeling of being the trailing player in Monopoly where you're like, I will never win, this game solves, because it says, okay, look, you're having a hard time, let's make it easier for you. Oh, you're doing really well, let's make it a bit harder for you, So you never have a cakewalk, and you never have something that's impossible. It's kind of an incredible experience. I played it over a year. You could play it quickly, if you wanted to, but we sort of played it over about a year with 3 friends. It's a 4-player game. You can play as a couple, another nice way to play it. And you have this adventure, and you have this story, and like amazing things happen. The characters that you kind of build up can die. You can sort of like mourn them. Some of them turn out to be traitors. They're actually acting for the virus, and they're kind of like bioterrorists or something. So you've got to keep your wits about you. And you have this emotional journey, and that's the kind of amazing thing about games, is that they've become this new phenomenon. It's not just about like rolling dice and random things happen to you. You kind of have this story you can tell your friends afterwards.
That's the kind of game that I think I would like, is these story building games, because that's the kind of games that I enjoy. Whereas these dice throwing games or card building games, they're not really my scene.
Yeah, so that's important to know as well. Is I think often we have these bad experiences with games, and then you just go, the whole thing's not my vibe, And yeah, a lot of games that we played as kids are dice chuckers. There's still dice chucker games out there. There's some that are okay. There's a sort of division in the community, which is what they call Amero trash games, which are dice chuckers, combat, kill the other guy, games kind of like that grew out of Risk. And then you get the Euro games, which are passive aggressive, because we are genteel Europeans. We've fought many wars, and we don't do that anymore, yeah. But we like to kind of like tweak each other and make life a little bit uncomfortable. And those games are kind of for the intellectually ambitious. They're often about like building up an engine and the thing that you kind of, you try and beat your friends, but in a kind of, as I say, like passive aggressive way. A lot of the early games were about like the most boring things you could imagine, like trains and farming and kind of kid friendly. The one that I have sitting under my mic rest is called Happy Pigs. So you're a little farmer. It's kosher, don't worry. You can have
today.
It's kosher.
Not kosher.
But I'll give you a cool story about Pandemic Legacy to kind of like tie a little bow on that. So the first thing that happens in that game is you get a little card with like a scratch card on it. So like you remember, you could like win a prize, scratch off the silver foil, and it says, if you win in January, you get a and you're going to get a present. If you don't, you must destroy the card and you'll never know what's on it. And I said to my friends, I'm like, listen, I love you guys, we've been friends for years. If we lose this game, we're not friends anymore. and it created the stakes, and we lost. So what happens is you get to play it twice. So we lost the first game in Jan, and it's devastating. You feel the sense of loss. I'm like, guys, we have to do better. We have to beat this thing. And we did. We won the next game in Jan. We scratched the card. We won our little prize. And there's something like invigorating about that. It kind of feels like you're having this Christmas moment where you're opening up these packs and little surprises for you. It's kind of it's a wonderful little thing.
So I think that now is probably a good time to play the game. Maybe you can give the governments of the world some hints, because they clearly have no idea what they're doing.
Sure. Well, actually, you might become a little bit more sympathetic. So friends of mine who played that game and did very badly were like, "This is hard. This is not easy. Like combating a pandemic." And that resource allocation bit, that's sort of going, can we keep the hospitals topped up enough? What happens when the numbers get too high? And the cities kind of collapse. And it does make you think in the strategic way and the kinds of good choices and bad choices that you could make. By the way, you think about where we're spending a lot of our days, it's like this. It's looking at a screen, and there's a lot to be said for sitting around a table with your friends and, doing something that doesn't involve a screen. And that's one of the things about board games that I really love, is that you have this authentic moment with people while looking at them in the eye. And, you kind of get to see, you get to see that little tear fall down their cheek when you beat them, Or you get the euphoria of beating the game together.
No, I love board games as well, and I mean, when we decided to do the stream, and I looked at YouTube, it's amazing, the variety. And I mean, I also looked up some of the ones you have. I take it you like a lot of historical period games, like Titus and Euphrates, and what's it, Zolkin, and I don't know what else. I can't read. What's that other one? Masks.
Champions of Midgard.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
and it's another one, Dogs of War.
Yeah.
So yes, the guy in Board Game Coffee, Mice and Mystics. He did speak about that. It wasn't his top 50.
So there's a couple of good. If you're like interested in kind of getting into the hobby, there's two big channels that kind of help me quite a bit. The one is called Shut Up and Sit Down. It's a couple of British guys who are very funny, have that kind of dry sense of British humor, and they have a whole bunch of channels about like a whole bunch of videos about what games to introduce to newcomers. They have a whole bunch of like lists of games in different categories, and their thing as well is that like games do different things. So some games are about a certain kind of experience where you're trying to beat someone with your intellect, and other games are totally different. So I'll give you an example of another game that I really recommend as a kind of newbie. So it's called Dixit. It's a French game, and it is one of the most beautifully designed games, and very simple rules. So I'll say this, which is games kind of have a reputation pretty male, right? Guys like to kind of beat each other, and this is the game that I found my female friends has been the most enjoyable. So these are some of the cards that you have in Dixit, and you'll sort of get that like Alice in Wonderland kind of dreamlike quality out of them. And the way the game works is really clever, and you'll also never play the same game twice, which is cool. Is you wind up with a pack of these cards, which all have these beautiful little images on them, and one of you will say a phrase. So I went and made up some phrases. So I made a little modification of the game for fun. So there's a fortune cookie, a line from a book, a line from a song, and from a movie poster. So here's my movie poster one. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. Quote from Jaws 2. And you'll find a whole bunch of these cards will have things with water or water creatures or something like that, or something about danger, or safety. And the idea is that that phrase that you use is ambiguous. And you all try and put in a card into the center that you think matches it. And the person who's named the phrase, if everybody guesses their card, they lose. It was too obvious. If people guess other people's cards, they get points for it. So it's a very simple mechanic, but you wind up playing totally differently. The other thing I did was we played while eating some Chinese food the one night, and I said, hey, why don't you crack open a fortune cookie, see if you can use the phrase. So one of the fortune cookie quotes I have here is, anger begins with folly and ends with regret. You know, they're like perfect for these kind of mystical things to kind of play with that game. And yeah, wonderful thing to play with kids as well, and to play with like inventive people. I find, you know, the kind of person who wants to beat their friends in battle is not the kind of person who wants to play Dixit. But it's just, you know, so knowing your friends is important for what you play. Those of my friends who are kind of artistically inclined love this thing and play endlessly. Also, the kind of game you can play in half an hour, and then you want to play again immediately.
Okay. Yo, those pictures are beautiful. Hey, Ruth.
Yeah.
They're really gorgeous. That artwork is amazing.
You know how many artists there are in South Africa? We have got such talent in this country. Is there a gaming design, like, forget digital, I'm talking just board game design for this sort of thing in South Africa, or not really?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So I think a community would be great, because you do have these wonderful artists. If you look at the image above my shoulder, that's made by a South African artist from a book as well. I'll show you the little book.
By the way, guys, hello, all our
Yeah,
viewers.
don't forget to like the stream and subscribe.
And subscribe. Yo.
So
Okay.
this is Super South, made. So it's kind of. Thought I'd make it hard for you there, Laura. So kind of cool little thing about this. There's an app that you can download called ArtVive, which is a kind of virtual reality or augmented reality app. And if you stick it on the cover of this book, this little creature pops out. It's a little like funky half man, half deer. And the book's full of illustrations like the one behind me, and made by South Africans. So yeah, there's a lot of talent here. There's some really fantastic people, and I think there are people trying to make local games. And what's nice about gaming that's sort of financially possible. So I don't know if you guys have ever bought anything on Kickstarter. The number one selling type of thing on Kickstarter are board games. So the idea of Kickstarter is basically you say, hey, I've got this great idea. Are you interested? If so, you know, fund me, and if we get enough money, then I'll make the thing. If we don't, I'll give you money back. And so people would fund like movies or albums. But what happened was they found that games were perfect for it, because what happened with some of these games was that you got a lot more money than you expected. You said, well, given that we've got this much money and given the scale of production, maybe we can start to make the game a bit nicer. So instead of plastic pieces, we'll have wooden pieces, or we'll add more cards. So there's a game now called Frosthaven, which has raised $13 million, which is an enormous amount of money for a board game. The people who are sort of participating in this process get to sort of play a role in what that game will look like, what the characters will look like. That's kind of an exciting thing to do. And if your idea is crap, well, then you found out, and you didn't have to go into production and spend a whole bunch of money with designers and make this thing, and it turned out to be an epic fail. You kind of got to find out in advance. The other interesting thing is that there's a digital platform called Tabletopia that lets you play with board games digitally, and it's a nice way for people to kind of play test stuff out. So they'll get people that are interested in the game, say, here's this concept I have. Before I go and print out 1,000 copies, why don't you guys play and tell me what you like? And you might have been that kind of kid who played Monopoly and was like, this is okay, but maybe we could have this other rule, that would make this game a bit more enjoyable, that's the kind of beauty kind of things that you can change the rules on the spot. You can play around, you can have variation.
Brilliant.
But I see Monopoly now, you can play 3 different ways. There's 3 different versions of the Monopoly now. If you read the rules, there's actually 3 different ways that you can play it now. I bought it for my daughter for her birthday.
Don't you think toy shops should be advertising these games? Because besides from this week, I didn't even know these games really existed. Yes, we've heard of Risks and D&D and Magic, and you see the packs and wherever you go, but you don't see these other games. How readily available are they here in South Africa?
So thankfully they are. There's a guy who runs a website called Timeless Board Games. We're sticking a link in the description of your video. Local guy has tons and tons of stuff. Will deliver to your door. What I'd recommend is sort of, watch some of the videos. Like, as I said, the other guys who've been running videos for years, the Dice Tower, and they've got reviews of tons of things. They've got great lists. Get a sense of what it is that you want out of your evening. How many people do you want to play with? There's an interesting phenomenon at the moment as well, which is, given lockdowns, there are solo board games you can play. So there's a game called Scythe. That's a sort of very beautiful game that was designed by this guy, Johnny Stegmaier, and made on Kickstarter. But the game has a little automata pack, so you can play against it, and you can sit there with the cards, and you can play on your own and move your figurines around. And there are other kinds of games that are designed for solo play. But if you are locked at home with your family who on the verge of murdering, maybe you can sort of keep the thing together by playing some board games, And as I say, you can order them with timers.
Because I wanted to actually ask you before this, because as Ruth was saying as well, it's not like you can walk into toy shops and find these games. They're just not easily findable. But also, the viewers want to know if you play Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, so that was kind of my early route into this sort of stuff. So I played when I was a pre-teen. I think I started playing when I was about 10. Sort of probably played until I was about 18. Was okay as a player, and then kind of got back into it in my late 20s and took it quite seriously and got to winning a few big competitions and things like that. And it's a fantastic game, but it's an incredibly expensive game. So a deck of cards can kind of cost you like $5,000, but it's this wonderful way to think strategically, and there's a joy in tournament play where you're up against other people that you don't know that well. They've concocted this thing that they've made themselves, and you're playing. It's asymmetric. So if you think about a game like Monopoly, we all have the same position. So the only differentiator is I'm the top hat and you're the dog. In Cluedo, you're red, I'm green, but they're same. A game like Magic is totally different. The thing that I have made of my 60 cards is going to be totally different to the thing that you made. And there'll also be a tournament scene, so there'll be certain kinds of decks that are played in that environment. And they talk about not just trying to beat your opponent, but trying to beat the scene, which means understanding the meta game, working out that this sort of, let's say, very fast-paced deck is going to be very good against these kind of slower decks, but the slower deck's going to be good against this combo deck. And then kind of knowing what your scene is like. And there's kind of regional scenes and there are international scenes. So I had friends who went and competed in the World Champs, and I think South Africa kind of used to be one of those nations that came like 100th in the world. And this friend of mine, I think, got South Africa into like the top 12 and won a bunch of prize money. And
Sure.
and it's a kind of wonderful thing. I mean, the thing about something like Magic is that it appeals to people in different levels. So you've got all this great mythology. You had like the original games like vampires and elves and goblins and like kind of beautifully drawn little things. And then there are people who don't care about that stuff at all. They just care about the mechanics, the sort of being able to beat someone else efficiently. So what's interesting, the game also has traditionally been very male, and that changed when they made competitive fairy decks, and suddenly you had a whole bunch of women playing, going, "Fairies are great, and I love kicking all these guys' asses," So,
Yes,
and
What was your character? Who was your character? Because my brother plays, but he's a certain character.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, so I suppose I never thought of it as a kind of character-driven thing. I suppose my enjoyment of those things is the mental gymnastics. I like that you're trying to solve a hard problem. Before I played Magic, I played chess. So I think I like the other stuff around it to an extent. I've grown a greater appreciation for it. To give you an idea, so the kind of when I played Magic, we used to go to a thing called Icon. And they had a massive Magic tournament, but you'd have all sorts of other activities going at the same time. So you had the board gamers and the Warhammer, the LARPers, and the Dungeons and Dragons guys. And the beauty of that was that someone always had someone else to look down on. You could say, I know I'm a nerd playing Magic, but oh my God, I'm not nearly as bad as those Warhammer guys. Have you seen them painting their figurines? I mean, what a bunch of losers. And then, of course, as the years went on, I went and painted some figurines.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, and I think that's.
Sorry.
And what is interesting as well is one of those sort of things that's a bit more theatrical that people play at these conventions is live action role playing, which also tends to be a bit more kind of open to women, and this idea of being able to play a character, and you sort of had cosplayers dressing up like Harley Quinn or like She-Ra or Batgirl, and sort of play out this little improv theater thing, in a kind of fun little world that it was gamified. And that's the kind of interesting thing about that world, is that there's this room to play, to I don't know, get in touch with a childhood-like version of yourself,
Do you laugh? I see somebody did ask, do you laugh?
I only laugh when I'm in court. So we have to wear robes from the 1600s. I wear a bib. I say things like "my lord" and "my lady," and it's you're involved in an epic battle on behalf of your clients. There's like real money at stake, and or people, don't do your job right, go to jail. Laughing with consequence.
Wow. And what sort of got you into? So I just want to. Is there anything in the comments? Saw something and then it's gone. Someone spoke about Catan. Oh yes, Cat. My girls are addicted to Catan. Yes, there are pirates in the Explorer version. So
yeah. So Catan is one of those games that you can go and buy at like a Reggie's or Exclusive Books. It's one of the games that got me into it as well. It's quite accessible. It's quite addictive. It's a bad game. And I only say it's a bad game because I've had the joy of playing games that have grown out of Catan. So it was revolutionary. It is one of these classic Euros. But it's quite a long game. You're kind of in for 2 hours. It's quite a shouty game. So you wind up getting into these sort of disagreements with friends. The way the thing plays is grindy. Once you've played it enough, I get it, and new players love it. They really do. There's a world outside of Catan that I would really recommend, and if people like a game like that, I'd recommend other things. Something that's pretty fun and has a Catan-y feel is Carcassonne. Also a classic, been around for about 20 years. And you'll never play the same game twice, which is kind of cool. And in Catan, what you have is you have a board full of hexagons with a bunch of things in the earth. So like there's forests and deserts and mountains, and you're kind of building a city along it. And in Carcassonne, you're building the ancient city of Carcassonne in France. And you're building collaboratively this place that'll never look the same because there's multiple variations. But you're playing in a way to beat your friends. So there's a kind of collaboration competition thing that goes on. Also, games are half an hour. They're quick, they're fun, they're super addictive. You can learn the rules in 5 minutes. The other beautiful thing about some of these modern board games is the rule sheet in here is 1 page. It's double-sided. That's it. You know, a game like Twilight Imperium is a fat book. Magic the Gathering is, I think it's something like 600 pages of rules now. You know, it's quite intimidating. You know, if you want to get good at that game, you have to be a lawyer basically. And there's something quite nice about playing a game where it's called organically complex. So you have a very simple rule set, but it iterates so many possibilities. So I would thoroughly recommend something like that.
Okay. Ooh, awesome.
And yeah, so I'm wearing, as you can see, so I've got the tiara, and I'm wearing it is a copy shirt. It's not obviously an original. It's actually from a local. It's a stand-up. Okay, so there's my Wonder Woman figure. Love that they cast Gal Gadot for it. Okay, Mark, you've got something on as well. If you want to share.
Yeah, so I'm a child of the 80s.
Yes.
I think like you two. Well, you look like children of the 90s. This is Skeletor.
Yes, Skeletor.
Yeah.
So I'm a big He-Man fan. Surprisingly, one of those things that's still around. And I have a couple of other little goodies next to me. So this is an 80s He-Man riding a battle cat.
Yes. I believe I gave mine away.
Oh, Travis.
I remember those. I used to see those things at my cousin's house.
I had, oh God, it drives me insane. Yeah, but carry on, Mark. Sorry.
And here's my little modern-ish Skeletor. I think this thing's about they remade He-Man in the early 2000s, so this is from about then, riding Panther. But they're making a bunch of new toys now as well. And Kevin Smith, at least the last I heard, was working on a TV series. There's a She-Ra show that's on Netflix. So you know, our kind of childhood lives on, which is quite cool.
Yes.
Yeah, that is cool. And you know what? The kids of these days, they don't understand those kind of things. They don't understand, because, you know, like we used to watch it back in the day, and then they're like, why would you watch this? Like, they don't understand. It's like, well, we didn't have much else going in the 80s, so.
Yeah, there were no games, and I think one of the coolest things, I mean, there's lots of cool things. I could sit here for 3 hours and talk about how grateful I am that Marvel's come back, and that look, I think the DC stuff that's come out, it has been rather cool. I was a little bit apprehensive because I am a DC fan at heart. I was a bit apprehensive when they started changing all the characters up and stuff. What you looking but no, I'm very impressed. I thought a good Wonder Woman would have been Megan Fox. She was my first vet for that. Like, I really thought she must be Wonder Woman. And with Gal Gadot, I was like, is she gonna pull it off? La la. And I was so impressed by that movie. It was awesome. If you people haven't seen it and you've been living in a cave, go and watch it. It rocks. She did a fantastic job.
I've only watched Wonder Woman because the kids wanted to see it. So I watched it with the kids. And then I watched, what was it, Batman versus Spider-Man or something. Oh, Superman.
Yeah. So I'm going to sound like a total grump now. But okay. And I think there's something cool in a way about the mainstreaming of geek culture stuff, and you know that those movies like Hit the Lights Out and the kind of, you know, biggest box office ever, and it sort of gets people into reading comics. I'm a huge comics fan, but I basically stay away from Marvel and DC because I think there are all these wonderful graphic novels that are made for adults. And I don't mind, you know, the kind of the stuff that you're going to get in that kind of world, but it's a little Manichaean. It's good versus bad. So this is regarded as the first graphic novel. It's called A Contract with God by Will Eisner. Nice Jewish boy. And it is. It is really an unbelievable story. It's sort of set in New York. It's about people living in these like in tenement housing in the sort of 1940s. Beautifully illustrated. He's got a great drawing style, and realist as well. And so I kind of am like an avid consumer of graphic novels. There's just incredible stories out there. My absolute favorite, which I cannot recommend highly enough, is a book called Habibi, which means beloved in Arabic. And it is this just majestic story. It was made over 7 years. It's written and drawn by one guy, Craig Thompson, and it's this epic love story. And sort of travels over time and sort of plays around with Arabic culture. There's beautiful Arabic calligraphy in it, and just absolutely incredible. So if you've it's that kind of journey. So my feeling of you watch a Marvel movie and you go, that was cool. Maybe I should go and like read a Marvel comic. And you're like, hey, comics are cool. And then I kind of think the trick is to try and get beyond that, and discover this whole other incredible world. And there really is there's so much out there. There's all these like really interesting, creative indie guys and a couple of South Africans, as I say, which is cool doing this kind of stuff. I find this is the interesting challenge that I have. I mean, you may have felt this as well. We're in a funny format, right? We're watching something on YouTube, and we didn't do this 5 years ago. We wouldn't have sat and watched a long form thing on YouTube, right? That's weird. And I find it's the same thing with trying to get your friends to listen to a podcast. They're like, what the fuck's a podcast? Like, why would I listen to like a radio play or what, Like, so comics are the same thing, right? To get someone to change format is very hard. To say, hey, so like you might have some inkling of an experience of this, and I want you to just push yourself ever so slightly into this other realm, and just trust me, it'll be worth it. And I mean, you guys have found that. I mean, when you're a young channel with a shitload of subscribers, people going, hey, this whole YouTube thing is pretty cool. It's live, it's fun, I can interact. Wow, I never would have thought. Trust me, there are other new formats out there. Pick up a board game, read a graphic novel, listen to a podcast. You won't regret it.
Yes. So our good friend Chad, and I'm sure you've seen Chad on all the YouTube, the streams.
Yeah. No, Chad's a nice commenter on my channel.
Yeah, so he says, please ask Mark about the making of the Sandman movie, one of the greatest graphic novels of all time, and that's who I was going to mention as well. But yeah.
Yeah, so some of you will know about Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman also like the gateway drug for people into the kind of fantasy world stuff, and really started life as a graphic novelist, although he's quite famous for his novels. And Sandman's also kind of regarded as the young woman's gateway into graphic novels. I mean, he took something from, I think it's originally a DC character, the Sandman, and he created something totally new out of it. He created this entire world. I mean, very literary in style. So one of the books is sort of set in a Shakespearean world. He does stuff in heaven and hell, kind of playing with like William Blake and things like that. Very well written, very beautifully drawn, and long. I mean, so there's 70 issues of Sandman, and he's recently revisited it. So there's a new set of graphic novels that have come out, which are just unspeakably beautiful looking. And Gaiman's a massive talent, right? I mean, he's one of the most like whimsical, fun, impressive writers. I think the first experience I ever had with him was a TV show that he wrote called Neverwhere, which came out in the kind of 90s. And I remember I must have been quite a young kid, and it aired like after my bedtime, so I had to like set the VCR, record the thing. And the idea was that there's these sort of this magical part of London, beneath the underground, and that the magical people are homeless people who you would otherwise ignore, and they have their own rules and their own codes. And what's interesting about that is it's been adapted in multiple ways. So the series, which is still pretty incredible to watch and has some like wonderful actors in it, although with a kind of BBC budget of the 90s, got adapted into a novel afterwards, and then into a graphic novel later. And there's something interesting about that when we think about works of art that we love going through these different format changes. So Chad's question was about, it's funny, I actually hadn't heard that. I can imagine it's the kind of thing that it's the dream project that never gets made. I have a feeling that it would be impossible to make as a film, but probably fantastic as a series. And we're in this this golden era for series at the moment, where you can do things that were otherwise unimaginable. You can tell these long stories. You can have, Game of Thrones is a 70-hour movie. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Were you a GOT fan?
No, not initially. Hey, it took me a little bit of convincing. I think I watched the first. Seems overrated. And then it kind of had someone twist my arm again, and it is kind of incredible. It is an amazing world that was made. I mean, I think we're all going to have our gripes with some of the later seasons, but it is some of the most kind of dastardly characters you're ever going to see on the screen, right? I mean, you sort of meet someone like Joffrey, and you think, oh my God, it can't get worse than this, and it does. It's so much worse.
I just find it very drawn out. Like, I get bored very, very quickly. Like, even on these 3.5 hour movies, I can't. It's just too much for me. I get very bored very, very quickly. I don't know if I'm just ADD.
Well, it's an interesting thing. So, I mean, I think these 3.5 hour films are interesting, and that when we were kind of growing up in the 80s and 90s, films were an hour and a half, an hour 45 minutes, right? The idea was that people don't have long attention spans. They can't deal with the epics of yore, like a Lawrence of Arabia or a Ben-Hur. So things must be short and bite-sized. The TV we watched when we were young was 22 minutes, reset button stuff, things like Friends, or The Simpsons, and now, as you say, like these blockbusters are over 3 hours, and teenagers watch them and they watch enraptured. And that the series we watch is very long form. I mean, as I say, 70 hours for Game of Thrones is quite a big deal. I think what's interesting about series is that they get the time right. So a movie can be both too long and too short. So 3.5 hours in one go feels like a chore, whereas something that's 45 minutes, it's rapid pace. It's sort of got all the beats. You maybe watch it in when you have a little snack in between. But you can have this long story that sort of, like is always going to surpass what you would do in cinema.
Yeah. Because I actually went all the way up to season 3, and it just, after season 3, I was like no, I felt like I physically couldn't endure those amounts of hours anymore.
And I know you were only watching it for the sex and violence, so, that kind of tapers off anyway.
But I must be honest, my favorite character is Khaleesi. I love Khaleesi. I love the way that she went from being the meek, like little girl to this powerful woman. That, to me, I love that part of Game of Thrones. That was like my most favorite thing.
Stark ravingly insane because she didn't get the D.
I mean, the funny bit, of course, is all those their daughters, Khaleesi, and then saw how the show ends. It's like all those people who called their kid Adolf. It's a bit of a bad move.
Yeah,
Robert. It is a very pretty name, though. I do like the name.
Speaking of Adolf, not Adolf though, Laura. Khaleesi, yes. I think one of the best and greatest, you talk about like you're not so into Marvel, but one of the greatest like pop culture scenes I think that is heavily underwritten and probably went over people's heads was the ending of Deadpool, where he goes back in time and he goes to the crib of where it says Adolf A. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And
sure.
He's a boy and it's a bit sinister because he's gonna kill a baby, but I mean, what if, and all these little bites. I think I think it's very, now that Disney's taken over, it's kind of a bit scary, I must be honest. Look, I also grew up listening to, watching Disney. We all did. I just think sometimes it got a bit bleh, if I may be honest. I think The Dark Crystal was great. There was also, what was that other one? Did they do The Dark Crystal? I'm trying to think. But they like went off on they did do a couple of what did they do? But yeah, they might. What do you think of them taking over Star Wars? That George Lucas sold the rights.
Yeah, so I think I probably saw that move with massive trepidation, and I think the kind of recent Star Wars movies have been pretty average, nothing to write home about. But The Mandalorian is majestic. It is so good. It just looks beautiful. It's trimmed down. It's like the acting is great. The world is great. Go and watch The Mandalorian if you haven't watched that. I think it's on Disney Plus or something, like, so, yeah.
Now do yourself
That's
a
it.
favor.
Get off the stream right now. End this conversation, Palika. Go watch Mandalorian. You'll have fun.
Scott,
I'm not a Star Wars fan, so.
What is your interesting enough? I watched the latest new Star Wars, the kind of rewritten New Hope with someone who'd never watched any Star Wars before as well. We kind of watched it and I was like, this is kind of cool. It's a nostalgia trip. It's, this interesting thing. What is it? The Force Awakens. And she was like, if you say so, what was your first Star Wars experience? What did you end up watching?
I watched Star Wars for the first time. I think I was still a teenager. I think that's the last time I saw Star Wars. But I was like, when you look at something and you're like, this is just so fake. I'd watch a lot of sci-fi movies and stuff like that because I prefer movies that are based on real, true life stories. I'm not a big movie fan to watch movies that are false, if that makes sense. I'm more of a crime. Yeah, I'm not a huge fantasy type person, I'm afraid. I hate to tell you.
So do you watch rom-coms?
Sometimes. I prefer comedy. Right? I prefer crime. Like crime and true life stories and that sort of thing. Like I can sit and watch that Discovery ID channel like all day, all night. It's like no problem. I have no issue with that. But watching sci-fi. There was only the one sci-fi movie that I actually know too. I didn't mind that one with Will Smith. I just can't think of the name right now. It was Will Smith and his.
The story about Will Smith. So he said to his agent, he's like, I'd be a Hollywood megastar, I'll set up the rules for the game for me. This is after he'd finished like The Fresh Prince. And so they said, all right, well, let's go and do a diagnostic exercise and let's see which films tend to get the big box offices. And it turns out that like 9 out of 10 of them were sci-fi films. So he said, that's it. I'm only doing sci-fi. So, he did Independence Day, which was a huge hit. Men in Black,
I enjoyed Men in Black.
I'm Legend.
Yeah. So there's a train of them. Yeah.
But there was that one that he did with his son, where they were in that ship and then the spaceship crashed, and then they were in that other realm or other world.
Lost in Space, the remake?
No, it wasn't Lost in Space. I can't think of the name. I'll think of it.
What was that? And there was what was that fantasy thing he did as well, but it didn't get such a good write-up. I thought it was okay. I think what was it called? Something Fantasia or?
It's a Netflix film, right?
Yes. I can't think of the name right. But yeah, he's been through the molds. But isn't there some sick
After Earth? That's it. Picked it up for me. After Earth. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
John Murray is a huge Star Wars fan, people. Huge. But isn't it? And apparently, Chad says that J.R. Martin. Well, I know J.R. Martin's going to rewrite the last 3 stuff-ups, or is it not? I don't know what's happening. But he's apparently been asked to fix Disney's stuff-ups with the stories. I don't know if that's true or not. But J.R.R. Martin and George Lucas are very similar in some of their writing. Like, they both delve onto this kind of incestuous, sinister plot within the family. You know what I'm talking about? Like, it's a bit weird, but I suppose, hey, look at Bold and the Beautiful. That's one crazy pile of poo there.
Well, Game of Thrones is that soap opera format, right? But, The Bold, it's like you've got a bunch of families who are at war with each other. We check in with the particular characters in different episodes. That's the structure of Game of Thrones, right? It's just a bit more sexy and a bit more violent. But there's something interesting about, as you said, like fantasy playing with older archetypes. So George Lucas was very conscious of, earlier works before him. So Star Wars draws on the 7 Samurai. Tolkien's drawing on sort of ancient myths and legends from the Greeks or from Middle English, things like that.
Sorry, I'm just see. This is what pop culture does. Now, me and the TG guy are getting into it about this one and that one, and I'm like, okay, whatever. But I love it. I love that it can over race, over financial, unites all people of all creeds, all social distances, everything. It can just bring people together. I think that's what I love about pop culture.
Ruth, Chantal says Bright was a Netflix movie.
Yes, that one. That's it. Yeah. What did you think of Bright, Mark?
I heard it was terrible, and I didn't watch it. Although I heard it's so bad it's good, kind of terrible, right? And maybe it's an interesting thing. Like something I liked doing when I was younger was watching these incredibly bad movies with friends for the fun of it. So like a kind of Mystery Theater 3000, or like a Giant Killer Tomatoes. But I think you got to be in the right mood and be with the right people.
Yeah,
the right. Yeah. I mean, I remember watching Willow, and I'd actually love to watch it again. I haven't watched it. It was like crazy. That was like Little People and Willow, and I mean, even let's be honest, Never Ending Story. I mean, that's sure. That's just amazing. And that princess, and it was just wow. And you were talking about length of movies. Like I was like, I want more. I want to know what happens.
You felt ripped off. You're like, I thought this was the never-ending story. It was only an hour and a half.
Yes.
What the hell?
Yeah, it was incredible. And that's what I also believe. I think the generation of today is kind of lacking, unfortunately, is that they're not reading books. They, I mean, YouTube's taken, I know my son's become a bit of a buff with regards to First World War and Second World War history, because he can consume it on YouTube and then know everything he needs to know. So it's like, wow. And I think had I had YouTube to explain it so simply to me, I probably would have done fantastically in my history essays as well. But yeah, reading does take you somewhere else.
I think our generation, we had to build up more of an imagination than what the kids today have to. Because today they sit on their computers or sit on their tablets or laptops or whatever, and they literally just play games. That's all that they do. And
your
no matter
mother
how
was saying all you do is play with your Tamagotchi in school, your Game Boy, glued to your screen,
Yeah, and I mean, in those days that we didn't even have TV for a full day. I think it was in the afternoon or something. We never had TV. It used to show that circle with that beep noise. It was so irritating.
Yeah, the premier TV ban.
Yeah.
Oh God, remember? And then also, if you wanted to watch something that came from overseas, you had to tune it in from RSG. What was it? Or South African? You had to tune in the sync with
Radio 2000.
Yes, or something. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, they have a simulcast. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, and remember Thundercats.
Yes, Thundercats. Yeah.
I have a little Rhino figurine in my cupboard.
Okay, awesome.
And then remember, you used to get Mnet for that 1 hour at night time. I think it was from 5 until 6 or something. That was crazy.
Yeah, when Mnet was still big stuff. What's it, KTV? And if you didn't have KTV, you were this misfit like kid. They couldn't watch KTV and Mnet, and it cost a fortune. And as my mom was a single parent, it was like,
Yeah, I was the misfit.
So was I. But yeah,
I used to spend my school days in the library.
Off.
Yeah. I was there so often. They're like, "Geez, we may as well make this chick a library prefect because she's always here."
This is clearly a show for showing our vulnerable side. I mean, I'll admit to many things, but library prefect, that's up there. It's quite a thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hey,
I mean, you got me. I've got blue lipstick on, for heaven's sake. I mean, really.
I'm proud to say I'm a bookworm. Proud of it. Very proud.
Good. What's next to your bed? What are the books next to your bed?
At the moment, I've started on 50 Shades of Grey.
Oi, babe!
I started on that. But yeah, no, because I got two of the books.
You kind of go a few pages in and you get distracted.
No.
I'm teasing, Laura. I'm teasing. I couldn't.
I must be honest. One of my
movies. I couldn't even watch the movies. I was like, like kill me now. Having to read the books. No.
But the books are different to the movies. Like even Bridget Jones's Diary. The funny thing is, I read Bridget Jones's Diary before it became a movie, and it's two completely different things. But one of my favorite books, actually, it's called the Gospel of Matthew, and it's actually written by a South African.
Okay.
And it's actually hilarious. It's so comic because what he does. No, what happened is he actually became Jesus in the movie. He was playing the role of Jesus in the movie. So this is basically his story of playing Jesus in the movie. But it's like simple little things where he explains, he's driving along the road and he gets a flat tire, and where the people from the township come down and they all run and help him with his flat tire. And, it's all like little South African stories built into it. And I just find it absolutely amazing, amazing. I love that book. I've probably read it about 20 times because I just have to read it again and again.
Is it fun?
You're putting me on the spot now.
Sorry. Okay.
I have like the name. When you have the name on your tip of your tongue, but you just.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, go and quickly look if you want.
It's okay. I have Google as my best friend.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Imagine if Google crashes. Oh my God, there'll be so many dwarf people out there.
So, on that front, to kind of do another little punt for great graphic novels, there's one that you can go and get for free right now, which was designed to be read on a laptop, and it's called The Private Eye. And the premise of it is that all of your Google searches become publicly available. And people are so ashamed as to this information being out there, Laura in particular, that they wear these avatar suits in the real world. So they sort of dress up like permanent cosplay so that people can't track them to the things that they were found searching for. The graphic novel was written about 7 years or so ago, and is immensely prophetic for the kind of world that we live in at the moment. Such a cool commentary on the kind of internet age. And if you had to think about what's that one account, if it had to get leaked, which is the one that you'd be the most embarrassed about? I mean, for Ruth, it's Google Photos, obviously. For Laura, I'm not so sure.
Google Photos? What's Google Photos?
Google Photos is what's automatically backing up all the photos on your computer and your phone.
Maybe that would be 6-7 years ago when I was on Tinder and on cake. I'm not blushing there, but not so much anymore.
Google has a long memory. This is the problem, I would think for teenagers today, it's probably like the obnoxious stuff they said on Twitter that'll be held against you for Kingdom Come.
No, it's crazy. And that's what was so great, I think, growing up when we did. I mean, we used to play, what was it? Knock knock. What's it? Tic-tocky. And we used to like crack eggs on people's doorsteps and run away. And we'd, you'd like throw stuff over the wall and you'd get up to so much trouble and do horrendous things. Like I think if someone had to probably see me marching at Nile Crocodile back in the day, I'd probably look back and go, oh, my soul, what the hell was I doing? But
I just remembered the name. Google's not my friend tonight. It's not helping me, but I remembered the name, Bruce Marciano.
Okay.
Rocky's brother.
I have no idea. Google is just on my. When you search Matthew, the book of Matthew, the book of Matthew on Google, it does not come up with the book.
No, it probably comes up with the King James version, whatever. Second. So talkie, that's it, alright. So which book, and you've obviously read extensively and you've seen a lot of movies, which movie did a book the greatest injustice that you know of? And which book or movie did the best justice to a film or book? You know what I'm saying, vice versa.
Yeah. So one of the sort of it's when you have a work of art like this that is it's hard to decide which is better. Because the book is so incredible and such a unique art form, and the film is just like majestic. The Clockwork Orange. So I saw it in London when it got unbanned. It's been banned for 20 years by Kubrick because of the kind of copycat killings. And it is just the most visually incredible film. The music is incredible. McDowell just kills it. It's so good, so visually impactful. And the book, which is written in a kind of invented language, which is Nadsat, a kind of mix of English and Russian, is initially quite hard to get into because you've got all these unfamiliar words, and then you click and it's incredible. And what's interesting about the book as well is that there's two versions of it. So Burgess wrote it in a very particular way. So there's 3 parts, 7 chapters in each part, and so 21 chapters total. And the idea is that you have 777, the number of God, 21, the age of maturity. And the idea is the lead character, Alex, sort of reaches this age of maturity, and the last chapter of the book is his redemption story, him sort of moving away from the life of crime, sort of recognizing the error of his ways, becoming a good citizen. And the American version of the book cuts it out, and it ends with without the redemption story for Alex. And Kubrick, when picking which one to adapt, said we're going to use the redacted version because it's a much better ending. We don't have to tie this thing up in like a nice little bow. And Burgess was kind of horrified. He felt like you were denying this central figure. But it's probably one of the best examples where cutting things out made for a much better product. So I'd say that's probably the kind of, it's hard to pick between the two as to which one is better. And that's quite rare. I mean, I think often there's books that we love and it's intimate, the experience you have with reading a book, and seeing someone else's voice in a film and so many different people playing that role, it can often sort of destroy the fantasy that we had in our minds. And I think that's often why films can be disappointing,
Yeah, especially if you read the book.
Yeah. And I think part of it might be that we've got a bias as well, which is that we sort of have this particular experience of the book that's intimate, that's our own. And it might be in some cases that the movie is better. There are a couple of examples where I think there have been good adaptations. Actually, some graphic novels are well suited for adaptation. So there's a great graphic novel called Ghost World. The writer sort of tells these quite like real stories about small towns, and it lends itself to being filmically adapted in a way that's, and I think maybe a lot of novels have been like, I think Lord of the Rings, for example, will probably be a good series because you've got this long form thing, and even though there's 12 hours of movie, you could probably make a hell of a lot of good series out of that.
Yes. In fact, they should do it. They really, really should do it, because I know some people can't sit through the whole movie without going.
I don't blame you.
Which is so sad to me, because the second one, The Two Towers, was, and I mean, I tried to get through the books. It was hectic, but I
enjoyed Harry Potter more than Lord of the Rings.
Harry Potter is like a pop culture phenomenon. It's incredible.
Guys, listen, this is YouTube. This is a sensitive space. You don't want your channel banned by bringing up hate mongers like J.K. Rowling. I mean, I'm starting to wonder what kind of show I'm on here. Like, woman's show, likes Harry Potter, seems very transphobic to me, guys. I think you need to cancel yourselves.
I mean, I know it's not an intellectual read, really, but it kept the attention, and I was really surprised. Not the movie so much. I read all the books. I don't know if you see behind me. I do have all of them somewhere there.
You need to borrow them to me one at a time.
Ha ha ha! I
haven't read the Harry Potter.
Sorry, I don't borrow. I don't lend. Neither. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I will. I just know. Whenever I lend a book, it never comes back.
Yeah.
So, but there are lots of shops and hospices that do. Also, people look at your hospices, especially now. A lot of people are getting rid of stuff. A lot of people have immigrated. Look for good books. Look up great reading lists.
But there is
Yeah.
actually bookshops that you can go and either trade books in, like you trade one book for another one,
Secondhand books.
or they got, there's one at Stonehill in
Okay.
Edenvale side. Yeah.
Okay.
So
There's also this wonderful thing called the Kindle. And you can get any book in the world that you want right on your fingertips right now.
No, Mark, it has to be a book that you can feel and you can hold and you can
Smell
the pages.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I always wonder about that kind of reader. Like, it's the sort of book fetishist. And I have 7 massive bookshelves pouring over with books. I love books, but I think I love the ideas in the books more. And there's something about the physicality of a book, and I'll buy that for some books. So I collect first editions. So some of those are beautiful objects. I like art books, but there's some books that are just, you just want to have the information, and a Kindle is incredible for that. You can, travel the world, with this little thing in your pockets, and whatever you want, someone can suggest the thing to you, and you can go like, cool, let me get it right now,
Or
that's an incredible thing.
Down, and then you forget later, yeah.
Yeah.
But I must be honest, that's one thing that I love with books, is it can take you into a whole different new world. It can take your mind off of everything that's happening in the world, and you get so engrossed in the book that you end up in this whole different planet even. And that's what I love about books.
I think it's people's imagination and people's creativity to share the story. Haven't you written, Mark? I mean, you've written stuff.
So I actually have a book coming out quite soon. You guys are going to be the first people to hear this. Actually, this is exclusive.
Yeah.
So Brain and Event, we've been running for about 15 weeks now, and we've had this. Jason Webelov and I have had this incredible bevy of wonderful guests. We've spoken about some philosophical issues like around time travel and ethical conundrums, all sorts of things. And what we decided to do was take some of our best episodes, have them transcribed, have them edited, and produce some books. So Jason's a sci-fi novelist. He's got 15 novels, pumps out an enormous number of books. And also, the great thing about working with a successful novelist is that they've got that kind of thing down to an art form. So we have a wonderful cover designer, and our first book is going to be about the lockdown, and it's about the moral and political responses to the pandemic, and looking at whether lockdowns are a good idea, how effective they are, whether they're the moral thing to do, whether they're politically legitimate. So that's the first book in the series. We will then be doing a sci-fi one. So we'll have one, as I say, on time travel. The classic time travel thing is called the grandfather's paradox. So you mentioned earlier this idea of going back in time so you can kill Hitler. What if you went back in time and you killed your grandfather? Could it work? Assuming you killed him before he had, your own father. If he wasn't there to have your father to have you, you have this kind of impossible loop. And so we talk about some of the logical problems around that, and the idea of like parallel worlds and things like that. We talk about Star Trek as well. So Jason's a huge Star Trek fan. Partly Star Trek's kind of more philosophical than Star Wars. It's not just space opera stuff, exploration of ideas. And we talk about teleporters and personal identity and things like that. So yeah, there'll be some ones in philosophy of art.
So
and
Rick and I are in the same boat, her and I. We both want to come to the signing, and we want to sign coffee.
Deal.
And
Me too.
Yes, and Laura.
Mark, I have to show you something. There's actually a book made about my family story.
Oh.
My uncle has actually taken up writing, and it's called. You're gonna love this. It's called Abnormal: The Holmes Family Story. But yeah, he got the pictures drawn and everything. But you see, it's by my uncle Alan Holmes. So,
really?
this is actually a book that he wrote about our family.
That's wonderful. That's a great thing to
So,
have.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm obviously kind of interested in genealogy. I've kind of got a bit of an interesting surname. So I've like gone back to the town of Oppenheimer, where all the Oppenheimers come from. And my dad commissioned a book when I was a kid about our family history, and we have an interesting family history. My grandparents fled Nazi Germany in the 30s, and so it's sort of, quite a thing to go back to Germany and sort of find out about your roots and things like that. But speaking of that book, I think I've managed to save the best game for last, which is the Sherlock Holmes game. So speaking of another famous Holmes, this is called Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, and it is one of the most unusual games you'll ever play. You can play with you can play on your own, you can play with a partner, or you can play with lots of friends. Basically what it is a storybook. So you kind of start off with a mystery, like let's say there's a murder, and you're there to help Sherlock Holmes solve this murder. And what you do is you go around running around 1880s London, knocking on doors, picking up clues. And you do this with your friends, and you put on an accent and you read characters out. And at any time that you feel like it, you can go like, let's stop playing the game and let's hazard a guess as to what we think happened. And it might not just be a murder. It might be that there's other little things along the way, jewelry that got stolen, or all in the Holmesian world. And the game comes with 10 different cases and a map of London. And it is the most fun you can have with your friends. Great thing to do with a dinner party in between.
I have to find friends who like board gaming. I've got one friend who lives overseas, and whenever she's here, we get out the sheshbesh, the backgammon. We've actually adapted our own rules where we're not allowed to stack. But yeah, I love board games. Everyone else somehow around me doesn't. So I'm in my own world. Like
I like board games. But I must be honest, when I get together with a friend of mine, Jane, I don't know if she's watching tonight. She seems to have a problem with her phone. But usually we go to her and we have a braai, and we end up playing games until quite late, sometimes midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Which games? This is the thing I think.
This is a family show. Like, please don't
no, not that. Well, we tend to pull out the cards and the casino chips, and then we play like Red Might and Chase the Ace and all those sort of things. We start off with Chase the Ace because then the kids can play. But then as the evening gets on and the kids get a bit more tired, then we change to Red Might and the kids can go do whatever they want to do. So
I've definitely found a new hobby. Thanks, Mark. I'm definitely going to any shops, or is it a shop? Is there shops online? I think you did mention something.
Yeah, so Timeless is online. So they have. I'm pretty sure they'll have most of the games that I mentioned tonight. There, and they can always order in stuff for you. You can. I haven't tried ordering much stuff overseas during lockdown, but I had bought a fair amount of stuff with Amazon. Often, very quick. You can get stuff normally within a week, and quite affordable. But yeah, Timeless is great, and it's nice to support local, and you'll get the stuff very quickly. And they have pretty good prices on things. I mean, the sort of amount of joy you get out of playing a game with friends, it's often the price of going to watch a 3D movie, but you've kind of got the game afterwards, You don't get fat from the popcorn.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So Mark, the board games that you showed us, is that your top 5 board games?
It's an interesting thing. I think it's like sort of saying I picked games that I thought would be good introduction games that for someone who hasn't played and is intrigued, these are the kind of games that they'd like. I go through different phases, so it sort of depends what mood I'm in. And I think it's the same with music, right? It's sort of, when I was younger, I listened to a certain genre of music, and now I'm much more guided by my mood. I listen to a variety of things, and I think it's the same with games. You sort of say, are we in for something epic? Do we want 3 hours of storytelling? Are we in for something short? Is it competitive? Is it collaborative? So you kind of want to let the mood of your room decide what you play. And some games just warrant lots of replay. I will say this, which is for those of you that are interested in games but can't get together because you don't want to sit indoors with someone coughing on you, and you don't want to get the Rona, there are other options. So Steam, which is traditionally used for playing like big expensive computer games, has converted a whole bunch of board games into digital versions, and they're dirt cheap. So you can buy games for like 15 Rand. And there's like bundles you can buy. So not a bad way to sort of, if you want to get into the hobby, go and have a look on Steam. A game that sort of also people love, that's a great family game. It's called Ticket to Ride. I think it's literally 20 Rand, and has tons of expansions. And you can play online with friends, or you can play against the computer. You can pass and play with people that you live with. It's something that I did early on in the lockdown, was sit on Discord with a microphone and headphones and play digital games with people I used to sit around a table with, and talk shit while engaged in this activity. And there's something that's really fun about that. That's sort of different from the other kinds of experiences you have with mates.
I think that's where I got the idea from. I heard you talking to someone, and I would like to do LARPing, but obviously, in the space now where it's sort of you safe being in your own home, where you can dress up. And then I'd love to host something like that. Like maybe after your book's out, we could do an evening where we get dressed up like tonight, and we do a bit of a LARPing session, role play, kind of thing.
That would be awesome. That would be it.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. So one of the things that I have been doing during this time is I run a theatre club. So a bunch of my friends are kind of, frustrated actors, and we all have normal jobs, but we pick a play, and we used to do it in the park, and we have started doing it again in the park because it feels like a nice, safe thing to do. But for a long time, we were doing it over Zoom, and it's fantastic. You get into, we sort of would pick a play, allocate a role, didn't do much pre-prep. You read along, put on an accent,
Cool.
and
I'm there.
super fun.
Okay,
You got a recording afterwards, really fun.
Cool.
That sounds like loads of fun.
We read a play that's a little bit too on point at the moment. It's Jean-Paul Sit, which is about hell and about being trapped, and it's sort of the famous tagline for the end of the play is "Hell is other people," and I assume for some people locked indoors with their former loved ones, they really feel that way. I happen to like other people quite a lot, so
Thank God. I hope you like us.
Yeah, you guys have been awesome.
Except me, because I'm not a Star Wars fan.
Don't worry, I won't hold it against you.
Oh, good.
Really watch if you can get The Mandalorian. Wow, I couldn't wait every week, like waiting for the next episode to come out. On the edge,
I'll
it was
check
just
it out tomorrow.
Yeah, it's great. And what's nice is you don't need to know a thing about Star Wars. You can enjoy it on its own.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean it's the kind of thing about a lot of geek culture stuff is it's a lot, right? I mean, if you say to someone, "Hey, there's this great show called Game of Thrones. It's only 70 hours of your life. You should totally do that." I mean, that's quite a thing to say to someone, right? Watch all 13 Star Wars movies, half of which are crap. Or my favorite is watch The Wire. The first 30 hours are pretty shit, but after that, it's amazing. Right? Okay.
Yes, I enjoyed Return of the Jedi. Was it Return with Natalie Portman? No, what was Natalie? That was.
You think of Phantom Menace?
Phantom Menace. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm so bad. I need brushing up. You see. But yeah, I enjoyed that backstory. I was so keen to get. Why did George Lucas actually let out? What was it? Episode 5, 6, and 7. Was it? Or was it
4, 5, and 6?
Yeah. Why? Like, just cause? And has he written all of them?
I mean, I suppose the question is, it's debatable whether, I think Lucas's official line was that he'd sort of written the 9 and, started in the middle and, but I mean, A New Hope was not released as Star Wars 4, at the time. It was reclaimed as Star Wars 4 when, Phantom Menace came out. Yeah.
The New Hope was the latest one, right?
New Hope's the original one, the 1977 one.
But what was the last one we watched now with Disney? And no, that was
9.
Yes, 9. But okay, never mind. I have to excuse me.
Mark, Elizabeth. No, not Elizabeth. Carl is asking, have you played Dungeons and Dragons?
Not really, to be honest. So it is one of those things that always sort of seemed intriguing to me. I've got friends who play. It's become massive at the moment. I think there's a bunch of celebs who play. I think there's probably elements of it that I'd enjoy. It seems like it can be a dice chucker, that you're doing a dungeon crawl with your friends and you're throwing dice around to try and kill baddies, and that could be a bit repetitive. I suppose the storytelling elements are interesting and the kind of having an ongoing character. I've done very little role playing. I played something at a convention once, which was kind of interesting. I think it's kind of amazing what you can do with the pen and paper in your mind. Yeah, there's a Dungeons and Dragons board game called Lords of Waterdeep that's set in that world. That's pretty fun. But beyond that, I haven't haven't spent too much time doing that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think we need to do an episode 2 of this.
I also do. Well done, Laura. You and I.
We've been going on very long.
Yeah, and I'll
We're
brush
taking
up
up
on
all
my Star Wars trilogy. And I don't know, the last movie that they just did, which one was that? Where they simulated what? I don't know. TG. I'm gonna whack you because of Skywalker. Was it? Was that the Rise of Sky? Anyway, okay. I'm just looking very doff now, but.
Although, to be fair, right, it was kind of forgettable. I mean, it's not exactly the kind of genre-defining stuff.
It was so woke. It was so woke. Am I right?
I know one of them was. One of them had like the purple-haired kind of heroine.
I don't know about that, but I just felt
Purple
like.
hair.
I just felt yeah, because all the right.
You guys are wanting me to watch this, and then you're mentioning purple hair.
No. There's nothing. Listen, I still want blue. I love blue. If I was not scared enough to bleach this hair of mine and make it blue, teal blue, I would do it, but I can't. So, but Mark, thank you so much. I think we've had lots of fun, and there's still so much to learn. And yeah, maybe you should come on and do a short premiere to your book when it's ready to be launched.
Absolute pleasure. I'll bring Jason.
Yes,
can tell you about the books. We are planning, and this is also again a little exclusive. You guys are the first to hear about it. We only dreamt it up last night. But our plan is basically to kind of have a Brain in a Vat conference where we can have some of our great guests in person and make a day or a weekend of it. And so we have a friend who's got a wonderful venue in mind. I won't say what it is yet, but it'll be a great place for fans of the show to kind of get together, to ask difficult questions and have amazing conversations. And I'll reserve some seats for you guys front and center.
Excellent. We'll be there. Awesome.
There'll also be very good ice cream. That's a very good hint about things, but I won't say more than that.
Great
stuff. You'll have to tell us off screen.
Yes.
But,
yeah, thank you so much, Mark.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you have now a wide knowledge.
And don't forget to tune into Mark's channel, Brain in a Vat. Carl did post, and he posted the link for the Timeless website to buy the games. So
awesome.
Please go and have a look and make sure to subscribe and watch all his streams and give them all a like.
Yeah, and subscribe to us if you want to. Subscribe to us.
As you can see, we loads of fun. We even do role play.
No, I could definitely do one of those. All right, everybody. Mark, stay on for a little bit if you can.
Cool.
Cheers, viewers.
Cheers, everyone.
Have a good week.
Keep smiling and keep talking. Bye.
Cool.
I know that's what happened to me when I was talking about the book. I also went completely blank. I was like,
shit.